Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves, and we've got a bit of a special episode tonight. We are doing a bit of a listeners' stroke viewers Q&A. We've been asking for questions on social media, and we've assembled a crack team of Chris Borden, Darren Bentley, and Julian Jordan, who all contributed to our rapid reaction after Saturday's 2-1 defeat. Good luck to Mansfield against Arsenal. Certainly, I was impressed more by them second half than I certainly was by us. Like I said, though, we've got some questions have been flooding in on social media. We've got a video question as well. But let's start with FA Cup and Cup runs. Stephen Laycock reached out on X and said, "We've treated the Cup competitions with contempt now for 15 years under different ownerships and management. Shouldn't we be looking to win trophies or at least be competitive? And how can the club's mentality change owing Coiled's success because of a good cup run, not despite it?" Julian, we'll start with you on that one. I mean, we used to love a good cup run, didn't we? I mean, you know, I always think it's a little bit different when you're the Premier League club and you draw another Premier League club. But, you know, there is still magic in the FA Cup, isn't there? Even if some of the teams treat it with contempt, like making 9 changes for a game against the League One side.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only do we love a cup run, you know, just when you're specifically thinking about Burnley, but I think football fans generally, certainly football fans of a certain vintage like us, we just love the FA Cup. You know, when I was a kid growing up, I was really, really excited about the FA Cup. My birthday is a week into January, so it was usually around third round weekend. So I loved that. I loved FA Cup final day. You know, there wasn't a lot of televised live football back then. And so it was a big set piece game. The TV coverage started at 9 a.m. There's that quizzes between the fans, all that stuff where, you know, the TV cameras were in the team coaches as they went and approached Wembley Way. I was giddy with excitement by the time.
It's a knockout.
It was fantastic. It was just brilliant, wasn't it? And I always picked a team as well, and you know, I kind of supported one of the sides, usually the underdog for the day. And the FA Cup, if I think back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid, I remember who won the FA Cup, and sometimes I have to really scratch my head to think who won the league. And that sort of disparity, how the league's just got so much preeminence, I think it's been terrible to the detriment of the cup, and I really regret that. And I think for a club our size, we can get into the Premier League. We've demonstrated that on numerous occasions over the last decade or so. And at one point, we even looked semi-sustainable in there, but we never looked like we were really going to seriously threaten anything. We had that one. 2017 was it the season we got into Europe where we did threaten things a bit, but that aside, you know, it was attritional stuff, and it was about staying in the league was our objective. You take somebody like Wigan Athletic, I know they've been pretty abject since they got relegated, but the season they got relegated, they won the FA Cup. Now, I grew up as a little kid thinking, 1914, it's 112 years ago. That's how long it is since Burnley won the FA Cup. Wigan Athletic have done it in living memory, and it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I was supporting Wigan that day against Man City, the underdog and all that, and I was absolutely chuffed to bits for them, and I think a bit of that sort of glory, the opportunity to win silverware is massive for a club like us, especially in a season like this where we all kind of knew in January realistically, we're looking down and out in terms of the league. I said this on the rapid reaction on Saturday. Normally, you get knocked out of the cup and you say, "Oh, let's concentrate on the league." This season, we know we're pretty much down and out where the league's concerned. The cup was potential respite from that and an opportunity to salvage something from an otherwise dismal season. And we have abjectly failed to take that opportunity. And like I say, I think Simon and the lads on Saturday were pretty respectful to Mansfield. Fair enough. Thought their fans were superb. I'm glad for them. They had a really great day out because they demonstrated what the actual magic of the cup's about. That high excitement, travelling numbers, make loads of noise, and go home having taken a scalp. Brilliant. I don't begrudge them their big tie they've got against Arsenal. But I think from our perspective, it's absolutely shameful that we went out against the League One side and put up such a dismal display, especially the second half.
Yeah. And Daz, I mean, the magic of the cup is not making 9 changes to a side that's just won at Crystal Palace and doesn't have another game for 7 days and has an international break on the horizon. Were you surprised with Scott Parker's decision to make as many changes, just Esteve and Laurent keeping their place? I mean, I kind of expected Vice to come in for Dubravka, but it does show a bit of contempt, doesn't it? Not just for the cup competition, but the fans as well.
I'm not surprised he made as many changes. I was disappointed he did, but I'm not surprised he made as many changes. It is, unfortunately, the modern day manager's way of the world, isn't it? The pound signs of the Premier League outweigh any kudos or glory or excitement that the FA Cup brings. And I come back to what I said on Saturday, the team sheet. As soon as you put that team sheet out at 2:00 on Saturday, if Mansfield have anything about it, they pin that on the door. They say, this is what I think of you. This is what they think of you. They play the backup keeper. They're playing a left back who wants away. They played two centre-backs with the most appalling defensive record going. A right-back who's not a right-back. An attacking midfielder in a holding role. Flo Torino, enough said. Two wingers who failed to impress. And a 36-year-old centre-forward. Now, if that doesn't send a signal out, what does? But that's where the FA Cup stands now. You've got a group of teams at the top who are chasing things, who'll play the second string, but they're stockpiling players, so it doesn't weaken them. You've got a group of teams at the bottom who think the Premier League's everything, so they're going to play the second string because they're protecting the players. And you've got a little band of teams in the middle who can, in theory, have a go at it. But using that all said, using the Carabao Cup as a classic example, you know, Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, they all treat the Carabao Cup with contempt. But look who's in the final. Arsenal and Man City, the top two teams, because they stockpile the players. So, long answer to a short question. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed he made 9 changes. And he handed them that on a plate to me at 2:00 when he needed a win. He needed a bit of something. So just something to hold on to keep the fans that are still onside. And they just threw it all away. That side should have been good enough to win, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should say we should have perhaps been 3 or 4 up at half time had we not been so wasteful in front of goal. But
the other signal you send out is that you send to those players, you're not good enough for first team, I'm going to put you in the cup. So there's their motivation. Yeah. It all feeds into it, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, just on motivation of players and kind of, you know, Daz mentioned Quillinshi Hartman there. Simon Holding says, do you think there's an undercurrent at the club between management and some of these players? Issues with Hartman. Breuer left out of the Palace squad for footballing reasons and then not deemed, you know, worthy enough of a start in this ramshackle team he pulled together or even on the bench. And previously with Trésor. Simon says Hartman just went through the paces on Saturday. I absolutely agree. I've been calling for Hartman to come back in for Perez, but he can stay watching Espanyol in Alan Pace's box for all I care. Do you think there is an issue between the manager and some of these players? I mean, we've kind of heard from Scott Parker about a sticky period with Q and all of this lot, but he's never really come out and explained what the issue is, and we're kind of left in the dark a bit, aren't we?
No, I mean, like I say, we can only speculate, but it looks like there's been some sort of falling out or other, hasn't there? You know, maybe a few harsh words were said after that Fulham game in December. I don't know what it is, but you know, he was left out. You know, I mean, he only came in that night because Lucas Pires had been sent off at Newcastle, if memory serves me, and then. So Perez came back in the week after, but I mean I thought Hartman was absolutely appalling. I mean, you see he crumples to the floor for their equaliser. There's no foul whatsoever there. It's just pathetic, and you can see his effort. You know, he couldn't have tried any harder to look like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world, and. But to be fair to the lad, as I say, we don't know what's been said behind closed doors. But if he's nowhere near the Premier League, you know, he's not even getting in match day squads. Never mind, you know, on the bench in the side. So what is his motivation? If he knows he's not going to be involved at Chelsea, why does he give a damn? And we've all seen in this day and age, it don't matter whether you're in good bad attitude, someone will take him. You know, because it doesn't seem to matter in this day and age, because all people see is the potential, the ability that you've got. You know, people there'll be takers for him, and he'll get his next move, and he won't even, he won't remember he even played for us, sort of thing. So
We won't remember here either,
No.
Chris, to be fair.
No.
Yeah.
But the stupid thing is, I mean, he's got a World Cup in the summer, and he's knocking on the door of that squad, and he's sort of he's one of them that at this moment in time probably won't make the Netherlands squad. So he needs to pull his finger out. So whether it's, like I say, if something has gone on, we need to get the peace pipe out, don't we, or something like that. But it's otherwise he's staying at home watching the World Cup on TV like the rest of us.
Just on that though, Greavesy, that question about, is there potentially some division in the squad? I think it's an interesting question because the example we just cite there, it would suggest there is a bit of a problem. But Danny Donachie, he's the sort of coaching guy. I don't know quite what I don't want to do him a disservice in terms of what his role is quite at Burnley, but he works on the sort of psychological side. Is what motivational stuff. I've seen him saying quite a few things about the culture at the club's being really tested because of adversity, and it's stood up to it. So if that's the case, it's great despite all this adversity. Then that suggests there isn't some division, but I've got to a point where I'm not having a go at him. I think I've heard that message come from several different quarters, and I'm kind of sick of it, if I'm honest, because I don't give a shit about the culture anymore, because the culture is producing a dreadful outcome. We're losing every week. And the example I'll cite to counter that is in 1999, Manchester United won a treble and performed a miracle winning the Champions League in injury time, basically. There are two players in that side who hated each other's guts. Cole and Sheringham, they wouldn't even speak to one another. So what does that say about their culture? It says there was something deficient in the culture that they were working in, but it was a culture that still bred success. And our sort of culture where everyone's getting on, apparently, and, they're sort of thriving in adversity, it's producing consistent mediocrity.
Yeah. I mean, Daz, that's a really good point that Julian's just made there, because I think it's one of... I've thought about this in terms of, I think we're too soft, right? I think we're absolutely, we're soft as porridge, aren't we? I mean, that's part of the problem. Is part of the problem that the culture is too thoughtful, too nice, perhaps reflects Scott Parker as a person. I don't want to kind of, I don't want to be too critical of Parker as a person because he comes across as a, wonderful human being and things. But, is there a lack of somebody to kind of go, you know what, this stinks, this is shite. A bit like Foster did in the documentary that time where we ended up having the ruckus with Jack Cork. I know it didn't help us in that point, but it doesn't seem to be any of this kind of like, this is what it means. I mean, I saw Brun Larson walk past us and, I was sat in the front row of the Bob Lord stand. After the game, he had his hood up, he had his coat zipped up, and he just trudged off. Kids were shouting Jacobit him and all that lot, just trudged. Is there not somebody who, we often hark back to Stan and Sean that, start gripping people in that dressing room and say, look, you can piss about all you want floating around, but, you ain't doing yourself any favours.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in any squad of players, you're going to have a core of players who are right behind the manager, and quite often the manager will have a little group of players who's his leadership group. You'll have those who are on the sort of fringes who are okay and they're just getting on and they're quite happy to turn up for work, do the training, take the money, go home, still care about the club but don't. And there's others who'll want the manager gone. Now, the manager has to be strong enough to spot them and weed out the bad apples for a start. And I don't think Scott Parker doesn't seem to me to be a weak man. He seems, from the clips we see in the dressing room, he seems quite vocal, he seems quite assertive. But you've also got... your players have to police themselves a little bit and call that out, I think. And one thing that we're perhaps lacking in that group is leaders to call that out. Now, you've got Cal Walker, you've got probably Ashley Barnes, Joe Worrell, probably. After that, I'm struggling. Now, if they don't call it out, the players don't call it out, it'll fester. They've got to get that as a group. They've got to weed that out. I remember Keith Tracy was always deemed to be the bad apple, wasn't he, in the group? Yeah. And wasn't long before he was out the door. So it's a twofold thing. You've got to have a strong manager and support staff, and you've got to have players who will call it out. Because these players these days want for nothing. They are mollycoddled to the nth degree. Fed, watered, gyms on hand, cars are on hand, will help you move house, whatever it might be. They're mollycoddled. Their only focus, in theory, is on the football itself. But I think the players have got to start calling it out. If it's not happening, they've got to start calling it out. And you're right. I think the body language of the players at the minute looks to me to be really all wrong. And that screams like a leadership from the pitch itself for me.
Yeah. Just going on then, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of churn and turnover and the amount of players came in again last summer, brought a lot of players in. Chris, Pendle Claret, and I'm going to ask all three of you this one. Pendle Claret says, what is our worst signing this season in your opinion?
Do you really want to ask me?
Well, sir, I don't want to.
I think we know yours, Das, but
I say it's slightly unfair to single him out, and I'm not singling him out purely for performance or lack of. I just thought it was a strange signing to start with. But it's Loom Chowner, and I think there is potential there. But I think but when we were looking at the summer, and we all thought, unless we absolutely go mental in the transfer window, we're going to get relegated. Really, unless we spend, like I said, what Sunderland have spent 200 million plus. But you sign a player like Chowner who can't get a kick at Lazio in an inferior top European league, and you spend 15 million quid on a punt, which could have been used, whatever it was, for wages for a free on an experienced Premier League campaigner or whatever. But you're thinking that, if he's going to have to do remarkably well and hit the ground running for us to make any money on him. You're going to struggle to make your money back in all likelihood. I mean, he's scored an absolute wonder goal against Leeds. But other than that, we've seen, I mean, to me, I mean, I say we never saw Benson in the top flight really, but he looks like a more rugged Benson. He's physically superior to Benson, and he's got that one trick where he cuts in on his left foot, and rather than having the finesse that Benson showed, he just absolutely leathers everything, as we saw at the weekend, where a simple pass into the corner of the net and he scores. But he's twatting it like he's twatting everything else when he's cut in. But he's just, I thought that was a bizarre signing. I think Simon alluded to in the group chat. It screams of, that didn't scream of data, because the data would suggest, why are you taking a punt on him? That screamed of an agent saying, "Oh, we've got a great lad for you here. He's really, really good potential, and you'll be missing a trick if you don't bring him in." And it's just not worked in any way, shape, or form. Like a long list of others.
Yeah, Julian, do you agree on Chowner being the worst signing of the season? I mean, I described him as a raffle winner. 6-a-side yesterday, and there's a few players I've described as that over the ALK Ray, but he looks like the ultimate raffle winner at times, I should say. Let's qualify that, because I'm sure there is a footballer in there.
Yeah, well, on a sort of public forum like this, I'm kind of loath to pick on individuals, really. But that said, in summing up on Saturday, I did pick out a couple that I thought were poor, and Chowner was absolutely one of them. I thought he had an absolute stinker. And I'm not really quite on the same page as Daz, where Flotterino, as he calls him, because I wanted him to be good. I was quite excited about the signing at the time, and there's been points in the season where I've seen him get a foot in, and the octopus they called him, because he had something like telescopic legs and he'd make a tackle. But it's funny because me and Daz bumped into him and said hello before the game, and I was kind of hoping I didn't see him on the way out, because I knew it would be one of the "I told you so" moments, because he had an absolute stinker on Saturday. He was terrible. He didn't put a foot right. And when they both got hooked, I was thinking that's 15, 20 minutes too late. They should have been off ages ago. They were absolutely awful, the pair of them. I mean, you say who's the worst signing. I mean, it's a little bit of a crowded field, to be fair. And I hope I've not stolen your thunder there, Daz, because obviously you're going to speak about Florentino. I'd agree with Chris as well about Chowner. I think Breuer has been, a real disappointment. We spent a lot of money there. Money we can't afford to take a risk if we're spending 20 million on somebody. It's got to be somebody that's going to come into the side and make a difference. And it took him quite a while before he even featured. And then it's one goal, which is a pretty abject return really. Now, there may be circumstances around that. And again, I think in his case, I believe there is a player there. And assuming he's still with us next season in the Championship, I think he might look like a monster in that league. But he's been really poor. As I say, there may have been circumstances around that we don't fully understand, as carrying an injury and stuff when he joined. Another one which has been a weird one for me was the return of Larson as well. And there have been rumours as to why that happened. That was it Frankfurt, wasn't it? The rumour was they hadn't fully paid the fee, so an arrangement was made. We got him back. I don't know how true that is, but it would explain it, because it didn't strike me as a particularly strategic signing, and he looked pretty ordinary in a pretty ordinary side 2 years ago that got relegated. So what possessed us to think, something would have changed and he'd suddenly be a world beater this time round? So there you go. There's 4 for you.
There we go. Yeah, Larson from Stuttgart. Just because I know
Stuttgart.
I know the pedants on up the Clarets will be criticising us. But Daz, I mean, Florentino for you. I mean, I kind of agree.
I'm going to surprise you here.
He's getting a day off. Florentino's getting a day off.
Listen, he's not getting a pass out. Don't worry. He's got strong competition, is what I will say. I think there are reasons I can see why we signed Florentino. Champions League, Benfica, all those things. There are reasons also I can see why we signed Tuanzebe, who's been an absolute flop. Experience at the back. But the worst bit of transfer business we've done, for me, and it's a bit of a left field one, it's slightly dodging the question, but the worst bit of transfer business was keeping Alder Foster. Because we've been there and we've done that. And he should have been shipped out the door, because he's not a non-goal scoring centre forward. And the only thing that was going to keep us in this league was goals. Said that since day one. The only thing that keeps you in this league is goals. We have Fleming, we have Barnes, Breuer comes in, another one there has been mentioned. But why are we keeping Foster? We've been there, tried that T-shirt, thrown it in the bin. So there you go. Florentino, I'll have a day off.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I do. I mean, Foster, I forgot, was playing halfway through Saturday's game. I kind of looked up and he was there in front of me, and I was a bit like, oh, shit, he's still on his head. I didn't even realise.
It's not like my old New Order T-shirts that are gaining value. It's like one of them real, like, crappy bands that you're like, nah, I'm not having that.
It's more like a really poorly, badly made Jedward T-shirt.
Yes, your favourite Susan Boyle T-shirt, of which I have several. Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to the manager then. We've had a few people ask about the manager. Claret and Blue HQ, playing devil's advocate here, he says, is there any point in sacking Parker when, not if we go down, he has a 100% record of promotion? Talking point there. Do we stick with him for the next 12 games and go again next season? He can't think of any replacements. Martin Biddulph as well said, does Parker get as many Championships games as Law's got next season? And would you take Dyche as an interim till the summer? And then Daz Moggy, who I had the pleasure of sitting next to actually on Saturday. I didn't know I was going to be sat next to him, but we had a good old chinwag throughout the game. Daz is a big follower of the pod. He said, would the panel take Dyche back when Parker finally gets sacked in 2030? So unpack that one there, Chris. Is there any point in sacking Parker? Do we give him as many games as Laws, or would you have Dyche back until the end of the season?
Well, like I say, as much as we've advocated for Parker's record in the Championship, and you have to caveat it that he's done it with sides that you would expect to get promoted from that level. His Premier League records now, what is it? It's 13 wins in something like 78, which we've spoken about something before. Like that, yeah. It's simply not good enough. But I've been thinking long and hard about the Sean Dyche thing. So I've read a real takedown of him from some of the press in the Midlands, and the thing that some of the Everton support was split between sort of he did a great job keeping us up, thanks, see you later, and others who describe the football as the worst they'd seen in God knows how long watching the club, but it all goes around, oh, he's a dinosaur and this, that and the other. And God forbid he had the Nottingham Forest players run him to get their fitness levels up. I mean, that must have been harrowing for them Forest lads. Must have been, I mean, I was in tears reading it. But he actually, he had them working hard in training, and they couldn't wear snoods and woolly hats. And I felt like I was going to send like a donation to Morgan Gibbs White and some few of the lads and say, here's a few quid, buy yourself a woolly hat, and because my
Well, I
heart
think
went out to
were there not pictures of players completely knackered when he joined Everton? I mean, I think there was kind of rumours that players were throwing up, doing the same thing, weren't he? Instilling fitness in them.
I spoke to someone who was good mates with a player at Everton, and he just said he couldn't hack it basically, and he subsequently doesn't play for Everton. But it's if people look back to when you could talk about the Forest thing all they like. I mean, he would have kept Forest up. Style of football will always be a bugbear to some, but if you think back that first. And it was 2/3 of the season when he took over Burnley in the Championship. And it started brightly and it faded and we got dragged into a relegation battle. And the same sort of issues where I remember speaking to a good few players at the time who just weren't having Sean Dyche. And they left the club that summer. So, you don't need to name names. You just go through the lads who left the club in the summer.
Hey, Chris, jumping in there, I'll tell you one who wasn't having him after first training session. I remember speaking to him after that. He went, "I'm not having him." We're making us work like that. I'm not having him. Kieran Trippier.
Oh yeah.
Best mates now.
Yeah, because he had to. Well, he had to graft, didn't he? And he probably, as Trips himself had said, he probably needed to lose a few pounds around that time.
He made his career. Didn't he?
Exactly. But if you think you gave him that pre-season. When he'd not had to work with money, and he transformed everything. So I'm only, would he have done that at Forest? I don't know, because the expectations have changed in the last 10, 12 years or so, and everyone expects success yesterday. So would he have success with this group? I mean, how many would he have to ship out? He hasn't got his.
Not got his leadership group, has he?
He weren't. I mean, he obviously weren't having the David Edgars and people like the Brian Stocks and people like that. They just weren't his type. Like Stan, when Stan came in and Stan got his type, that happened to be half the Berry squad that he'd had success with. But you get the lads in that you know and trust. And I find it fascinating that we've been 4 years since he left. And half of that squad is still, doing well at Premier League level. But it really is. You said Wilder go back in at Sheffield and have success. So the sort of never go back theory, you take it with a pinch of salt. But as I look at it, I mean, if you were looking at the pool of candidates, he would be for me the standout candidate, and I wouldn't hesitate. To me, it's more about whether he'd want to work with the ownership group here. To be honest, after what happened
he
last
wants
time.
autonomy on transfers. I'm pretty sure of that, Chris. He'd need autonomy on transfers, and we'd need to know the relationship between the two of them was not sour in the least. But I tend to agree with you. I think he's got to be up there in the list of candidates to replace him. Whether Alan Pates would swallow his pride and take him back or not remains to be seen.
Yeah. Julian, just quickly from you, Sean, yay or nay, or do we give Scott Parker 12 games of next season in the Championship?
On the Dyche question, I'd have him back in a heartbeat because I think he'd instill some discipline and backbone into a squad that's sadly lacking it. So that's what I'd say on that. Whether he'd swallow his pride, I think he would, because he was happy enough to go to Forest and work under Marianakis, albeit briefly, given the experience that we'd had when we played against his lot in Greece. So he knew what he was going into there. So maybe he doesn't bear grudges and he would come back. As for Parker, for most of this period, I've pretty much been Parker in. I think the cautiousness tactically. I think it's come unstuck when you actually can't defend. In the Premier League and Europe against sides that are that much better than you. So another approach is required. The one thing I would say about Parker is in terms of how many games do you give him if he stays for next season? There's his contract circumstances have to be taken into account, because I think his contract's up in June 27, so he'd be going into his last year of his contract next season, and that poses problems for him. It poses problems for the club. If you're a prospective new signing who's going to come in, there's a bit of uncertainty there you're going to be working under. So I think it has to be resolved, because the alternative to getting shut of him is they probably have to give him an extension. And can you imagine how that would go down right now?
Well, we're still waiting for season ticket prices, aren't we? So I think that kind of tells you just quite how much ALK are worried about, announcements from the club. Following on from Parker, John Robertson says 25-26, 18 points from the first 26 games from Scott Parker, 23-24, 13 points from the first 26 games under Vincent Kompany. He says he's still Parker-ing, but has Scott Parker been overly harshly treated this season because his football is more pragmatic? Daz, will Scott Parker get more than VK's 24 points? Because at no point, I guess, VK's job was under threat, was it, in that Premier League disaster season? And Parker is statistically ahead of the curve on the points at this stage.
I think the difference between the two, just for answer your question, is Kompany came in as an exciting prospect for Vincent Kompany. Was at Burnley. I think he was always going to get time because of that. Scott Parker, a manager who's been around the block a few times, probably isn't going to get that same time. I'm still conflicted on Parker. I know I don't think I've literally said he should go or he should stay on this pod. I've always lent towards the fact that everything points back to the manager rather than saying he has to go. Kind of like sitting on the fence a little bit. And I'm still conflicted. I don't particularly like the brand of football, but I don't really fancy a beauty contest because of the uncertainty of who will come in next. So, unless it was Sean. But so I'm still conflicted on that one. But and because of the situation we're in, I think he'll get the time. He clearly, the time to sack him was December or January, and that hasn't happened. So I think he will get the time. And he does he deserve the time? That's one that's up in the air, isn't it? I think he's proven himself to not be a great Premier League manager, but he's clearly a manager in a championship who knows how to get sides out, and that's, I think, what they're hanging their hat on a little bit. So I think he will. I think he'll get to the end of the season. I think we'll be in a situation then where we start the season. Maybe there's a bit of a talk in the summer about him bringing in more of his players and less of the data-driven signings, because you can't really bring in the sort of calibre player you probably want to bring in the Championship compared to the Premier League. But I think he'll get time. I think he'll start next season. I don't think they'll get rid of him now, unless we absolutely fall off a cliff between now and the end of the season, when they might just call time early. But I think he actually will get more than 24 points. I still question where the next win was coming from. And then we go and get one at Palace out of the blue. Maybe a freak 7 minutes. That's to be decided yet. But we've got winnable games coming up. There are winnable games in there. So, yeah, I'm going to stick my neck out and say he'll get more than the 24. He'll stay in charge until next season. The fans will vote with their feet. Season ticket price will go through the roof. The whole fucking thing will come in. House of cards.
Interesting. David Lever asks, which players do you think will leave at the end of the season? And of these, who will the club make a profit on and who will the club make a loss on? Julian, who do you expect to depart Turf Moor in the summer?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I think Daz's shout is a pretty reasonable one regarding Foster. But I think this is a really good question, actually. I think it alludes to something slightly bigger in a way, and that's the question of our transfer strategy, full stop. Because I was just thinking then, we were talking about, Parker, he's perhaps been proven to not be a Premier League manager with his 3 clubs that he's got up. But in this instance, you can make some excuses for him because this is not his transfer strategy. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit, because the premise of our transfer strategy under ALK has been that we buy young talent fairly cheaply and we sell them high. They've got to be players with a very high development window. We develop them a bit, we sell them on, we make a big profit. That's a model that's not really a football model. It's a business model. It's got limitations because you can't really build because there's no continuity. You think at turnover of players we've had since Kompany joined us and during this period since then, it's difficult to compete because of that lack of continuity. His company's side showed with its 24 points. And the one success we can point to as a business case for that transfer strategy is Odebear. Right now, if you go back to the previous regime before Ale came, when we still had Sean in place and we had Garlic, etc. on the board, our transfer strategy then was often we'd buy experience, battle-hardened pros who would fight to keep us in the Premier League, right? But then you start looking at the outbound transfers during that period, and we made a shit ton more money than we've ever done under this strategy, which is supposed to be about making money.
I think that's a point Chris has made and Daz has made several times. The
Well,
amount of money we brought in.
Yeah, well, you'll be able to come up with more, but I literally just went on Chat GVT to have a look, and it's like Michael Keane to Everton, 25 million, Chris Wood, 25 million to Newcastle, Andre Gray, 18.5 million to Watford. My God, we had their pants down. Then, and there are others, aren't there? Right at the end, right, was that 20 going up to 25 to Everton. So even though that wasn't the intended objective of our transfer strategy then, it was a greater success than it is now. So even on its own terms, our transfer strategy has failed. And that's going to dog any manager, I don't care who they are. So as Daz says, if Sean came back, hypothetically, I think that question of him wanting autonomy, of course he would. Why would you not when you've seen our track record in the transfer market over the last few years?
We've got just a couple more questions to go. I'm going to ask this one of Julian, I think, because I think we made his opinions clear on this. Who is it who asked this? Joshua Warburton said, what do you think of the Alan Pace statement that he put out before Saturday's game against Mansfield?
Well, I mean, this is a reference to his, I didn't mean to offend you with the choice of words I used, but I stick with the contention that I made, about us all being 3-year-olds who were having temper tantrums. I thought it were pretty disingenuous, actually, because, at the end of the day, it's our club. I don't care what it says in legal terms on a contract somewhere who owns the club. I don't care who plays for the club. Players come and go, managers come and go, ownership groups come and go, but we don't. My dad next year is looking at having his 80th year of watching Burnley Football Club, and he's actually talking about not potentially. I think he'll change his mind when we get relegated because I think he'll prefer it in Championship. But it belongs to us, not them. We've got a right to be churlish if we want to be. They're just temporary guardians. And I think he's, in one way or another, we all work in sort of media and communications, and I've done. So I guess, we sort the limitations of those comments more acutely than most people do. They were ill-judged, I think I got what he was trying to say. I think really what he ought to have said was something like a call for unity. That would have probably done the job. But I think one of the problems he has is occasionally when he's doing interviews, he wings it a little bit and he uses analogies that he's just dreamt up in the moment. And, there was that one. I mean, like Company was the best looking girl in town. When you see it, you think, oh mate, where the fuck are you going with this? And it was the same when he did that interview on Football Focus and called us 3-year-olds having temper tantrums. As I say, we have a right. We have a right. And those of us who've been around a long time and have watched a lot of dross and felt like we've earned the right to watch good stuff, we also, when it turns sour again, we have a right to complain. It's our club, not theirs.
Yeah, definitely. Could not agree more. What was I going to go to? Oh, yeah, final question. This is from the Burnley FC Independent Supporters Association, who said, what one question do you think unites Burnley fans, which we would like to see put to the club hierarchy? Chris, we're going to start with you on this one. So one question do you think unites Burnley fans? What if we could only have one question as a collective, what would that question be?
Probably to speak to the chairman and say, where are we in terms of the project? How many years in are we into a certain project? Is this a new project? Just a bit of transparency. Talk to us about the finances. Is it if we don't get promoted immediately again from the Championship, are we in trouble? just sort of set the stall out again and say, this is. I mean, the 5 years into buying us. Let's sort of take stock and see where we are now, really.
And Julian, for you, what would your question be?
Well, it's funny because I started just scribbling a note then as Chris started speaking, and Chris said project and I said strategy. And I think we're ostensibly we're talking about the same thing, aren't we? I'd like clarity. I'd like to know, because as he says, it's 5 years. It's like, what's the plan? Where are we going to be in 3 years? We're assuming we're going to go down. How quickly do they need to get back up? We know that it's going to have to be sharpish before the parachute payments run out. Then when we get up, what's the plan to build towards sustainability? And is that what we ultimately really want as a club, or are they happy with sort of perpetual yo-yo status? I think the lack of clarity is an issue for most of us. I think we all enjoy a romp in the Championship, but these dismal seasons in between times in the Premier League are pretty demoralising. I think it might have been Woody who said on a previous pod, it's exhausting. And it is, you go for a year of highs to a year of just being fucking miserable, really. So, enough of that. What's the plan?
Yeah, chaos is draining, they say, don't they? Daz, if you could ask Alan Pace any question, what would it be?
Well, the question would be, what question would unite the fan base? And at this stage, I'm not sure in the situation we're in, there's a question that does unite the fan base. The two things you're looking for from a club are a healthy club, and a successful manager with players on the pitch. I think from a financial point of view, we better not ask the question because he's not going to give us the answer. Rather, a healthy club doing really well financially, in which case he'd tell us, or we're not, and we're seriously in debt, or our backs are against the wall, and they're not telling us anything. So don't ask that question because you won't like the answer. Manager-wise, is the other one. The question that unite fans: shall we get rid of the manager? But then the uncertainty of who comes in next, when you've probably got a third of your fan base who might not want the man who comes in. And remember, Parker came in without a mandate from the fans, so that will fracture the fan base even more, I think, because unless it's a company where everyone goes, "Wow, let's get behind him." So I'm not sure there's a question that unites the fans at the minute. What unites fans is teams winning on pitches. Teams winning on pitches covers a multitude of sins. And until we have a team that wins on the pitch, I'm not sure we'll be united again. But there's a lot of water going to flow under the bridge before that happens, I think. And I'm sure it'll be a managerial change down the line. I doubt it'll be an ownership change. But it's going to take a lot to unite a fan base, I think. That's as fractured as we are at the minute.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you very much, chaps. I hope we answered as many questions as we can. Lots of other questions as well. Lots of questions that were similar to the ones we posed. I'm sure we'll do another one of these during the international break as well. We'll be back with a preview of the trip to Chelsea a little bit later in the week. But until then, despite the FA Cup exit, despite the drabness of the second half against Mansfield, hope you've had a good start to the week. And until we see you next, up the Clarets.
44 years. It's not going anywhere. Okay? It's going to have good days, bad days, tough days, great days. We've seen that over the last 5 years that we've been involved. I had people coming up and congratulating us on the straight for making up for the 90s in Blackburn. I mean, there's just crazy stuff that happens. I don't get credit for it, but I certainly get all the blame for it, and that's absolutely okay. There will be great days ahead, I have no doubt. You have kids? Yes. Okay. You ever have a 3-year-old throw a temper tantrum in the middle of a public, event? Okay, well, at the end of it, you get embarrassed and you say, I'm sorry, but it doesn't stop you from being a good parent. And you hope that they grow up, and that when they do grow up, they're going to be contributors to society in the way that I'm sure your kids have and my kids have. And the reality is, we're going to keep going, and we're going to try and be the best parents that we can possibly be for this family.